What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So over the weekend, we did have Dragon Quest Day, and when you know it, Square Enix has some stuff to announce, specifically for two titles that were shown off for the first time years ago, with one getting a very, very interesting update and potential change from what we were expecting, but we're going to go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a very odd situation that's been happening with that Switch flash cart, right, where we had the Migswitch. Well, now it appears they have a revision of it that leaves current customers scratching their head, especially if you're still waiting for your order. And then we're also be talking about an event that's now been announced for this week that has people, yes, talking about PlayStation Showcase, but also what Konami could have up their sleeve. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel get Newswave early. If you'd like to learn more about that and support the channel further, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, as we are starting to get some early indications as to how it's doing in terms of sales, which we can see this is posted up. This is over on X from Christopher Dring saying Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door is #1 in the UK box charts. It had a bigger launch than the Super Mario RPG Remaster, with opening week sales basically identical to Paper Mario the Origami King. That's a great result. Bodes well for Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. That last sentence is very random, but I guess you could look at that and say, hey, the Luigi's Mansion fans, like the customer base there, has grown with Luigi's Mansion 3, so okay, 2 HD most likely will sell well when it comes out, even though it's obviously a remake of a already released game on the 3DS. But for Thousand Year Door, this is a great result so far. We have to see, obviously, other regions, how it did, but the fact that it's lining up next to the Origami King, which is a new original title for the Switch, might show Nintendo that, okay, there is a potential for maybe making a new original game in the Paper Mario franchise that does return to its roots with something like the Thousand Year Door and that setup and battle system. But we'll have to see how it does places like Japan, which we'll find out pretty soon here as we go through the week exactly how it did, down to like the single copy. Also, while we will be talking about Dragon Quest a bit more later on in the show, we did have some comments around Dragon Quest 12, which was officially announced with like the title card 3 years ago. Well, we have at least somewhat of an update for it. This we can see posted up over on Gamatsu, where they say the Dragon Quest series creator Yuji Horii has shared a short update on the status of Dragon Quest 12, The Flames of Fate. Now, this was in celebration of Dragon Quest Day. That is the day of the year that Dragon Quest first released back in 1986. That's May 27th. They say, thank you so much to everyone for the many Dragon Quest Day congratulations. There has been some worry about Dragon Quest 12, but I was actually in a meeting about it until just a bit ago. While I can't share any details yet, I want it to be something worthy of the posthumous work of the two, that being Akira Toriyama and Koichi Sugiyama, who passed away. I'll do my best. And I still think we're way off from Dragon Quest 12. It's unfortunately announced this so long ago now, it seems, because I think we still have years in front of us for that one. But still, they were talking about going in a more mature direction with it in terms of, I believe, the tone. And I think the fiery title screen was sort of a way to allude to that after the very bright and colorful and loud title screen. If you've started that up with the music that just blasts at you, it has a bit of a happier tune as opposed to the direction I think they're going to go with 12. But it's going to be a while. It's good to know, though, after all the stuff that happened at Square Enix, where people were trying to figure out what projects were even still in development, that they are still, as you'd expect, full speed ahead on Dragon Quest 12. Oh, and here's an interesting bit of information, update around Avowed, which is set to come out later on this year with Microsoft and Obsidian, which we can see, this is posted up by Jez over on X, saying, was it already known, Avowed had moved to Unreal Engine 5.3 with support from Xbox Tech and the Coalition. Because it has. Oh, okay, well, that's interesting, because we are seeing Unreal Engine being used, or 5 specifically, being used more and more, and I think with better effect. Like, playing through Hellblade 2, that did look noticeably better than Immortals of Avium. While that did shoot for 60 frames per second on consoles at the time, Hellblade 2 definitely showed off a visually impressive game that, while it wasn't as deep on the gameplay side, still looked really good with Unreal Engine 5. So I am interested to see the Coalition with Gears. We assume they'll be using Unreal Engine 5, and even Avowed later on this year. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Dragon Quest III HD 2D. That was the game they announced years ago, I think 3 years ago actually now, that was going to take on that HD 2D look and remake Dragon Quest III, which is really, really exciting stuff. It's an awesome game in the franchise, and now we have a bit more information because of Dragon Quest Day again over the weekend. We can see this is a trailer they posted up, and it does just say the legend of Erdrick draws near, and during this trailer towards the end, they say the legacy begins, and they have all the different platforms at the bottom. So we have Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S. Of course, that is always a question for these different RPGs out of Japan. Yes, it is there. And then Windows and Steam. So great news. It's not going to be locked down by the Epic Game Store. It will at least be on Steam seemingly day one. So, okay, this obviously is for Dragon Quest III HD 2D, but it gets a bit more interesting here as Midori did chime in with some more information. Now, for one, this didn't necessarily give us a ton of new info with kind of the title card not even really being there in full effect, but the platforms. They say they're currently hearing that Dragon Quest III HD 2D will be at the next Nintendo Direct, so we're only a couple of weeks off. We assume if it's in that normal E3 time slot, like that second week of June, maybe like the 11th or 12th, somewhere in there, so okay. Not too much of a wait, but it gets even more interesting, okay? So they're saying that it is out by the end of this fiscal year, all right? And they think it's the Loto trilogy, and that would refer to the first 3 Dragon Quest games that would follow Erdrick and their journey there, and that's an interesting turn, and I like this. So I did think about this a bit when they first announced it, the idea of it being Dragon Quest III, and how maybe someone new to the series would look at that title. Would they go, oh, that's cool, but I didn't play the first 2. Can I jump into 3? Even with Final Fantasies, like the mainline numbered Final Fantasies, I think it is well known. I see people still ask, but they'll say, can I play this without playing the other 15 Final Fantasies, right, with 16 coming up? And obviously we all know the answer is yes, for the most part. There are exceptions where you'll have like 13-2 and Lightning Returns or 10-2. For the most part, they're all individually contained stories. In this case, though, sure, I get it. It's Erdrick, and you have like these multiple games where the journey would go through. So instead of doing Dragon Quest III, do the opposite of what they did with Square did with Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? Different team, obviously, but the opposite. And combine these different games, Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3, put them all together, maybe do a few things to streamline so it makes sense as just one game, and put it out there with a whole new title. And I think that's an awesome idea, and I hope that is the plan. Midori, once again, they're generally pretty dead on accurate with a lot of the stuff they put out there, but they have been putting out a lot of stuff recently, and it wasn't even too long ago they thought about just retiring from the leaking scene and just moving on, and now it seems like every other day they're putting something else out there, even if it's not super relevant information or things we can really draw from, but that's a big one. So I hope that we do have that revealed during the Direct. It returns and it's like a whole new title, and they say, yeah, it's the first 3 games. We're just combining them all into a new game using that HD 2D look and that engine. That would be awesome, and I'd be there day one, so looking forward to that announcement, I guess, at the Direct here in a couple of weeks. Next up, let's talk about just a very strange situation with this Switch flash cart. Now, I did a video covering the Migswitch, and I pointed out some issues with it. The big one being, you gotta drop the cartridge in and then pop it back out over and over again to cycle through your games. And while there would be concerns around just the pin connectors and the spring inside of the Switch, say if you wanna go from game 2 to game 70, you can do the math there, how many times you gotta take the cartridge in and out. It was still just inconvenient, and going backwards for a game wasn't really possible. So apparently they've already redesigned it and upgraded this, and they're releasing their first hardware revision for a cartridge that the majority of people have not received yet. So this is over on their website, and it was posted up during the weekend, where they say at the top, announcing Migswitch V2. Says their first hardware revision is now in production and replacing the original V1. They say from now on, we are manufacturing only this new version, which now features a game-changing switch slash button. Quick press of the button will take you to the next game on your microSD, and a long push to the previous one. Because your requests were pretty unanimous, we decided to discontinue V1, so any new or pending order will now receive this version. V1 owners don't need to worry, their card will be updated exactly as the V2, and will have the same new features as V2 coming with future updates. Only the game switching method will be different. So mine doesn't have a physical button. I don't really know how that's getting updated. Anyway, they say if you're just a new customer or people expecting their Migswitch card, we hope you'll enjoy this new way to navigate between your games. There's a whole thing going on with unlock switch apparently between them. It's very strange, this whole situation. Now, I guess if you are one of the few who got your cartridge, you're probably annoyed because you probably just got it a few weeks ago and now this announcement has happened. That button, while it does sound ridiculous here, it's game changing, this breakthrough. It would legitimately make the experience better, but I will say, why not plan for V3? Let's do 2 buttons with like arrow left and right, and that's how you cycle through it. This seems like a very spur of the moment thing, while they do say they were taking feedback and that's why they got to this point. I mean, it feels like, yes, we beta tested, at least I did, and many others beta tested this, and everyone pretty much saw as soon as they were switching through games that it needed a button or a different way to select between games, and that it was pretty obvious. So I don't know, very weird stuff. Just getting the thing in the first place is already a whole situation on its own. So hey, if they show it off and the button is there and it works well, then for the most part, it would iron out the major gripe I had with the Migswitch, and it might be worth looking into, I guess, if you can get one. Next up, let's talk about Capcom and Resident Evil, as we've been hearing rumors and reports for Resident Evil 9. Well, now it appears we may have some other remakes to look forward to first. This is posted up by, we can see, this is from Dusk Golem over on X, and that's, we can see Aesthetic Gamer, aka Dusk Golem. Now, I haven't necessarily covered everything they've said because it has been kind of all over the place, but I have seen some people sort of corroborate this and say, hey, pay attention to this one here. So, okay, we'll give it a look. RE9 is pushed back to late 2025 or 2026. They say if everything I've heard is correct, which I fully believe it is, and I know others have hinted this, and I'm not the first one to say this publicly, actually, just it's not caught on. There's actually a remake of Resident Evil 0 and Code Veronica in development right now. I've talked to many others behind the scenes about this at this point. It's something I heard over a year ago, think it was going to get out whether I was the one to say it or not, and that's about it. This exploded online, many people were talking about it, 100-some-odd thousand views on the message here, outlining Zero and Veronica as potential remake targets. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Capcom's kind of been bouncing around with these remakes, although I guess they went, like 2, 3, 4, but now they're kind of then working backwards to Zero, like we're basically started there with that game, and then moving up to Code Veronica, and I guess they'll just do Resident Evil at some point, although we have that on the GameCube, and I mean, they've been going back and remaking games they've already technically touched up anyway, so in this case, they're just doing more Resident Evil remakes, and I'm curious how something like Code Veronica will go over, because I do see a lot of people calling for it, but I do wonder how many people will show up for it when it actually comes out and it's like $70, and, Code Veronica is one of the games that I really don't remember as much as obviously something like 4 or even 3 or 2. So I'd be interested in going back and playing a full remake for it. And if 9 really is pushed back all the way even to 2026, this would be a way for them to sort of bridge the gap here with multiple teams working on these different remakes, with I think Code Veronica probably being the one that most people are interested in, but hey, why not? Resident Evil 0, let's make a whole collection out of it. You can play through all the different Resident Evils, including the prequel and stuff. So, seems to be Capcom understands that Resident Evil is like one of their golden gooses next to, obviously, Monster Hunter. So, why not double down, triple down on it, and have a bunch more remakes. But interesting stuff. Let me know if you're someone who is familiar with Code Veronica, and if you're someone who's been calling for it this whole time with a remake. And in our last bit of news, speaking of remakes even, Konami appears to be set up for an event this week, and it's brought into question the idea of some sort of PlayStation event as well, but we can see this posted up, this over on Konami's account, saying, consider this your invitation letter to Silent Hill. Tune in May 30th, 4 p.m. Pacific to our Silent Hill YouTube channel for the second installment of the Silent Hill transmission, where we'll share game updates and deeper look at the film and new merch. Silent Hill Transmission. All right, fine, cool. So looking at this, people are now going, I guess there's no showcase or state of play. Technically, you could still have Sony come in and do their state of play tomorrow on Wednesday. And they could reference or acknowledge Silent Hill 2 there, and then, all right, here it is now with more context. They're going to spend more time showing it off at this Silent Hill transmission the next day. I do think that makes a lot of sense so that Sony can work to push it themselves, and then here comes Konami to kind of get it to the finish line. We've already seen Bloober Team mention this transmission as well on X, so yeah, go figure. Silent Hill 2 Remake will be there in full force, and I would fully expect a release date of some kind, which I believe it's set up to come out at the end of this year, and put it at the end of October, sort of around that Halloween time period. I think that would fit in really nicely. As for what else would be there, I mean, it's anyone's guess. It does seem like Konami is more interested in trying to get Silent Hill sort of back into the limelight. So they mentioned merchandise. Yeah, they're probably going to try to sell you different figures and things like that, but maybe some other offshoot weird games in the Silent Hill franchise, also very possible. So that's kind of what I'm expecting this week, but we'll see if Sony does show up and announce a state of play for tomorrow. And then after that, we can roll into a Silent Hill transmission and hopefully get that full release date for Silent Hill 2 later on this year. And before we go to the comments of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, if you have a PC gaming handheld, which one did you pick up or play the most? Okay, the Steam Deck got 78% of the vote. That makes sense. It's sort of what I would expect. But then look at that, the ROG Ally at 11%. That Lenovo Legion Go, it's, I mean, I've seen it a few times here and there, and even though it has that, I guess, the interesting control scheme where it tries to mimic the Joy-Cons, it's sort of almost a mouse pointer as well, I just haven't really felt as drawn to it as I have for the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally. And then there's the MSI Claw following that up, and then just a different PC handheld altogether. We do have that Ally X coming up at some point. I think we're going to find out more information about that one actually next month in June. And then apparently Lenovo is making like a smaller, mini, cheaper version of the Legion Go. So that was a report that Windows Central put out over the weekend. So the PC handheld space is going to continue to accelerate as we go along. And I assume the big one that we'll get at some point is Microsoft throwing their hat in the ring with an Xbox PC handheld that will run a different form of Windows. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Sir Aaron, who says, I really hope the first wave of games we get on the Switch 2 isn't just re-releases of Switch 1 games with ray tracing bolted on, resold for $70. So it's always possible, but I feel like at this point, Nintendo will use some of those upgrades as, sure, re-releases, but maybe selling upgrade paths like for $10. Maybe they look at it as a way to just get people to the new platform by just doing free upgrades if you've already bought the software, because it could also be a way to reinvigorate some of these evergreen titles that have maybe drawn down a bit in terms of their sales numbers. That could be a way to kind of spike them again, and they're just going to sell you the game anyway then, even if it's $60, sure, but still, they'd be able to sell them by just doing an update to show off the features of the new system. And I think that is a way for them to sort of fill in the gaps between what are going to be longer and longer development cycles for games that continue to get more and more complex to develop. But no, I don't think their whole first year is going to be mostly that. I think those will just be sort of nice to have announcements, as opposed to a big 3D Mario game, a new Zelda, some sort of, I assume, Mario Kart. I think they have a lot of plans here for big new releases to push their next system. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Whereas Dragon Quest III HD 2D maybe becoming the first 3 games for Dragon Quest? What do you think about that idea? And then also, what about the Migswitch V2? Are you someone still waiting for your V1 cartridge, and now you see this pop up? And then also, what about Silent Hill, the transmission? Are you hoping to see Silent Hill 2? And then what other ideas do you think Konami has up their sleeve? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.